We have roles to play. Thinking about your area of work with menopause, particularly, so one of the reasons why I'm so excited about talking about menopause is that one of the things I think that gets overlooked, not by you, but by great culture, wider culture, is that people, when they go through their 50s, quite often have children leaving the nest, in inverted commas. They quite often have parents going into care or dying. They quite often have health diagnoses. It's very, very common for people to get divorced in their 50s. It's very common for people to downsize and move house, move communities. So all of those huge major life events are very distressing, very much about loss, very much about change.
Welcome to the Menopause Mindset Podcast, the place to get some answers and feel supported along this often bumpy journey. Many people sail through menopause, but many people don't. And so my guests and I are here to motivate you and inspire you so that you can make menopause a happier transition for yourself and for your loved ones. I'm Sally Garozzo, an award-winning clinical hypnotherapist, a menopause educator, and I can't wait to share my passion about wellness and how we navigate these changes and transitions. So come on then, let's dive in. So my guest today is the lovely Jess May. Jess is an award-winning celebrant with over a decade of experience creating ceremonies for significant life events. She's a leading voice in living wakes and the first UK living wakes specialist. Living wakes are unique personal farewells for people at the end of life so that they can say goodbye before they die. The reason I'm so excited to talk to Jess today is because she is currently developing menopause ceremonies for women wanting to mark this time of change by using third act ceremonies, entering the third stage of their lives. Jess has a first-class degree in theology and religion from the University of Birmingham and recently relocated to Brighton with her partner. So Jess, I'm so excited. I literally say that every time, but I really am excited to talk to you.
I'm the
How are you
same
doing
when
today?
I speak to my people, and I always think it sounds like every time I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you're here. I mean it every single time.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? But I mean, when it's your passion, you pick the people that excite you, so it's brilliant. I know we have an amazing connection, didn't we, out of the blue, in the middle of a street.
We really did. And I was having a bit of an existential crisis that day. It's really weird. I'll just tell people how we met. I was feeling a bit blue and Graham said, let's go to that little shop over there. Like, we've never been there. And I said, yeah, let's try something different. It'd be nice just to get some fresh energy. And it's a shop called I Drew This in Brighton. It's a little art shop. It's really lovely. And you were outside promoting your business, basically your living wakes. You know, usually when people approach me in the street, I get a little bit, but I just felt called to listen to you. I don't know why, but I just thought, okay, just sort of, I was a bit floaty that day. And, you know, your idea of living wakes and talking about death as well, I thought, oh my God, this is the conversation that I need to have right now. Because when you're having an existential moment, that is what it's all about. And you really met me where I was at. Yeah, thank you. It was such a beautiful moment in time. So I'm very excited to introduce you to my audience and everything that you believe in and stand for and talk about. And you have your own podcast as well, which is awesome. How did you get into becoming a celebrant? Because it's a very, very unique trade, really. It's not something that one would normally go for. So tell me more about that.
You're not wrong. Well, hello, everybody. I know we've not met yet, but it's really, really lovely of you to be listening right now. I came to celebrancy by mistake. I studied theology, as we said, and I had planned to be a priest, which is a little bit bizarre to me now, but at the time I was very into church and I was going to do that. And then my sister was dying. She was 17 years older than, no, 19 years older than me, and she was dying. She was early 60s, and she had a young daughter who had fallen in love and wanted to get married. Now, my sister was a force of nature. She was really, one of those people. She would make things happen the way she wanted them to be. And she really wanted my niece to have a big traditional church wedding. And my niece is quite quiet, quite shy, wanted to go away and elope. So there's this tension between the two of them, and I was the compromise. So that I get this phone call, Jess, if I have to have a wedding, then it has to be you. Because I've been doing church and that they knew I was good at, leading services and things like that. So I went and studied to be a celebrant, and I didn't even know what one was. And this was in 2013 when it wasn't really a thing. And I loved it, and I never looked back, in a nutshell. So then I went and did the wedding. It's in the Algarve. It's on a cliff top. Well, everybody imagine it as the most beautiful day. Those days when everything's just magical. It's like this in-between space, and there are beds full of herbs, lavender, like literally scented air. And we're in this grove overlooking the sea on the Amalfi coast. A flock of flamingos flew past. All of our family were there. We all flew out. And we just had this incredible time for a week. And I was just completely sold, because I realized that was what I was called to. I was just called to bringing people together in that way, and using all my ceremonial experience and all of my life experience and my training and my degree. It was just what I was for. And I don't know that all of us have that kind of luxury. If any of you are listening and you have that luxury in your life, you will know the value of feeling like you are doing the thing you're meant to be doing. And then, so I think maybe the next year, my dad and my mum had already died. And the next year, my dad and my sister died a week apart in the same year. Which was bizarrely very liberating. I want to tell you, it was devastating. It was really, really, really hard, and it was really sad. But many of you out there will be thinking, yeah, that happened to me, and not many people admit it. So I'm going to admit it for all of us, that sometimes death can be quite liberating for those of us left behind. And that was my experience. And alongside it, big grief and big shock. Anyway, long story short, went into therapy. This, that, and the other happened. And I left it 3 years before I trained to be a funeral celebrant, because I just wasn't ready. When you're grieving, you just can't do it. I just thought, I'm no good to anyone, no good to myself. I came out the other side, trained to do funerals. And I spent 10 years running my business in Birmingham, where I would do really creative. I was the go-to for the firebrands and the crazy diamonds, the people who'd taken off on a moped, like on their motorbike in the morning and never come back, or just lived a really, really fast, busy life. I think it's just because my hair was pink. But anyway, that was how it was. I'm not that interesting myself. Anyway, that's my story, people. That's my story.
Oh. Yeah, we've got a wedding photography company here called Shotgun Weddings, and the way that she photographs the weddings and the people that come to her for the weddings are all very sort of alternative. You strike me that you I think you'd be good actually to collaborate with each other. But you strike me that you've got that kind of alternative vibe, which is so lovely and so like in Brighton, very, what's the word, attractive. People are attracted to that kind of thing. So when you go to college or whatever it is to become a celebrant, what do you actually learn?
That's a really good question. When I went, there weren't that many choices. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It was 3 days. And I remember saying, how do you choose people? Because, if you went to train to be a doctor or anything else, there's all these criteria that you have to meet. And the woman that trained me said, you're self-selecting. You wouldn't be here if you weren't good at this stuff. And it was true. And my friend Miranda, who's still doing it as well, had to do a wedding in her family. Most of the people that turned up on that course had just been asked to do it by people in their lives. So you sort of find yourself there. We covered the purpose of ceremony, the beginning, the middle, and the end, the point of it, the way in which celebrations and ceremonies are all about transition, which is where we come in with menopause. They're all about change. They're all about coming from here, being here, and looking to be there. it's always about that 3-part structure: before, the present, and the future.
Okay.
And within that, we learned about symbolic actions like ceremonies for weddings and unity candles, and how to be creative with the story of the people that you work with to create symbolic actions. So usually there will be words, usually there will be music, usually there will be some kind of poetry, and usually there will be a personal story, which is my big passion. But it all fits into what used to be called the liturgy within the church, which is about structure. And it takes you on a journey, like a story, like a novel. It sort of reaches a crescendo, and then it tails off. And then when you leave, you will remember when you go to ceremonies. Any of you out there who've been to a wedding, you will have seen the bride and groom, or the groom and groom, or the bride and bride, whoever, walking down with, confetti being thrown at them, rice being thrown at them, bouquets being thrown, all of this really celebratory stuff. And it's the crescendo at the end is like, it's the liberation. So you have all the vows in the middle, and you have quite often public accountability, so that you're saying to your community, this is who we are, this is what we do, hold us accountable, and will you also support us in this? So we learned all about that. And at the time it was wedding that I did the first time, and then funerals are all about catharsis. They're about the balance between tears and safety and joy and laughter, but all of it is about storytelling. And that's really, I think, the heart of it, and what I learned more than anything was so much about storytelling. And at the time it was, even then things were a little bit more straightforward. But I'm very excited about this, and this is very Brighton as well. I have a brilliant wedding for a throuple. My first polyamorous wedding, so I'm super excited. I have a non-binary person, and it's just so exciting, because obviously if you do something for 11 years, you can get quite stale, and it's so interesting following the way that things change.
Yeah.
But it all applies. It doesn't matter whether you're in a really traditional monogamous relationship, a heterosexual relationship. It doesn't matter what you're doing in your life. It's the same. It's all about affirming you as a person. And I think that's what they taught us on the training, albeit it was 3 days. And really, if I'm honest, I think I learned more on my theology training than I did at that point. It was a bit more like a post or a continued professional development for me, because I had such a lot of experience already.
Were you religious growing up, and is that what drew you? Did you have a family background of religion, Christianity? What drew you into religion in the first place?
So I grew up in the 70s in a white British community. And like many of us who grew up in that era, in those communities, we went to the Church of England school, and we had assembly, and we sang All Things Bright and Beautiful. And then at Christmas, we would go do all the Christingle services and the high days and holidays. And Mum was religious. She would teach us the Lord's Prayer, which I think doesn't happen anymore. So we were, I suppose now by today's standards, quite religious, but not really. Like, they weren't properly churchy, and they didn't really go in the week. My dad had gone off the whole thing in the 60s, I think. But going back a bit, my mother was a church organist, and my dad was a bell ringer, and my brother was a chorister. So there was a lot of history there, but it's more cultural than anything. But when I was 19, I got pulled into a revivalist thing. It was called Youth with a Mission. It was very 80s. But I was very vulnerable, and I got sucked into a quite black and white kind of fundamentalist approach to evangelical Christianity. Having come from a really sweet little church, it was just Church of England, nice old ladies. And then it's suddenly all arms in the air and falling over and screaming in the aisles, all very weird. But I got really, really into it. And it was because I was really, really vulnerable. And I had a form of epilepsy, and I hadn't really come to terms with it. And they tried to exorcise me. They told me that I would get better, if I came off the medication and all of this. Really unhealthy, dreadfully abusive in retrospect. But that's sort of where I ended up being hooked in. Then I took a 10-year break from it all, and then ended up studying theology. and then started to think, well, what am I going to do with it? And went back into the church a little bit, got really, really into it, quite seriously into it, but it wasn't evangelical or fundamentalist. It was a real liberal wing of the church. And I loved that it gave me a sense of belonging. But I do think that people get into church for lots and lots of reasons. And I did have a deep faith. I would have said I was spiritual but not religious. And I think most people will know what I mean by that.
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. Because I see a lot of people now, Russell Brand's just become Christian, and some other coaches that I know are getting baptized. And I guess baptism is a form of ceremony as well, isn't it? It's like entering into a religion, being welcomed into the fold, I suppose. Religion or not, there's something, or dogma, shall we say, or not, there's something about being held by a community which feels very special. My nan and granddad, bless them, were Salvation Army. And when I look at their lives, my nan at age like 87 had hundreds of birthday cards. Now I'm lucky if I get one off my husband, one off my mum and dad, and that's it. And I get text messages and Facebook messages, And so I'm kind of sad for that there's not as much community spirit around, and church and religion has provided that for so many people. And I do think there are dark sides to it, of course, like it can be quite culty in nature. It can be quite restrictive, and it can be, just, not non-accepting of the humanness of people's. I think there's a balance to be had. But I'm just curious. I'm really curious about people's journey through religion and out into like what you've done, becoming a celebrant. Something that you said previously about your mother and father's death, you said it was liberating. Can you explain why you found it partially liberating? I know you were in deep grief as well, but why did you find it liberating?
Because when they died, I realized that I had not felt able to be fully myself. And when they died, I realized that I was allowed to be myself from now on.
I can
That's
imagine
the heart
that.
of it.
Yeah, I can really imagine that, actually. Now you've said that, because we do screen, don't we, when we go and see mum and dad. There's, as much as we would like to think we're being authentic, in order to keep the peace, there will be a certain amount of smoke and mirrors, shall we say, that we're presenting ourselves with.
We have roles to play. Thinking about your area of work with menopause, particularly. So one of the reasons why I'm so excited about talking about menopause is that one of the things I think that gets overlooked, not by you, but by great culture, wider culture, is that people, when they go through their 50s, quite often have children leaving the nest, in inverted commas. They quite often have parents going into care or dying. They quite often have health diagnoses. It's very, very common for people to get divorced in their 50s. It's very common for people to downsize and move house, move communities. So all of those huge major life events are very distressing, very much about loss, very much about change. And so it's also the case, I think, for menopausal women, that there is a redefining of who we are in that moment. And it does tie in with the questions that you're asking around my experience of feeling very liberated at that point in my life, which was traumatic, but also it was bittersweet, I suppose. There was a level of discovery and hope and positivity in that experience. But I do think we need some sense of understanding that these are points of transition from one state to another, but also points of transition in our own growth and our own journey, which I know is very much what your work is about. So you would find a lot of menopausal women will be saying, I don't know, something happened to me after 50 and I just didn't care anymore. Or I just suddenly felt confident in a way that I never did before. Or I just had lost sight of myself, and now I feel like I'm rediscovering her, or I'm sad for her, I miss her. A lot often we talk about the previous woman that we've been, and that we miss her a little, or we can't believe who that person was because we changed so dramatically, and at the same time we don't. So I think there's probably a really long conversation to be had about how we rediscover ourselves in that point in our
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the ceremony is such a beautiful idea of marking that moment in time for you. And I actually think we could probably have 3 ceremonies through our menopausal transition: a ceremony for going into menopause, a ceremony for the menopausal year, and then a post menopausal ceremony coming out the other side. That could be it, couldn't it? Like the whole package, like a bar mitzvah for the menopausal woman, or something like a coming of age ceremony. But actually, because it's such a long transition, it feels like one ceremony is not quite enough. Like for me, going into menopause was quite dark. I had burnout, I had insomnia, I didn't know what was happening. I realized what was happening, then I realized I probably wasn't going to have children, and dove into all of the education around menopause. And then, oh my God, so much has got to change, and my eating's got to change, my exercise got to change, my sleep habits have got to change. It's quite overwhelming, and there's a lot of fear. And then now I'm kind of in that menopausal year where things are getting very, very sparse. And it feels like there's a much more of a settling down. Like I feel like I'm in the winter of my life, not the second winter, the middle winter. And there's a peace, there's an inner peace, there's a lot of envisioning, there's a lot of journaling, there's a lot of reflection. I don't particularly want to be around lots of noise and crowds. So again, that's another phase. And then I'm quite looking forward to my second spring, where you become like a child again, in a way, that innocence, that you've been reborn. So when I had a conversation with you about having a ceremony for myself, I had been in a bit of a dark place, and in that sort of existential, my God, who am I? What's going to happen? Does anybody love me? Am I that important? All these kind of dark things. And when we spoke about what happens in a ceremony, I just thought, that's it. That would be so beautiful, so life affirming to actually have people. Because one of my questions was, isn't it a bit narcissistic to have like a living wake, or have all of your friends come to your ceremony and tell you how wonderful you are, and share all their happy memories? And one of the things that you said is, actually, it's when you go to a wedding, and you can flesh this out, when you go to a wedding, it's not just transformative for the couple, it's transformative for the people that go to the wedding. It's so important for them too, because they're reflecting on their lives, which again made me think, you know what, it is a good idea. And I really would love to have a menopause ceremony, and I'm definitely going to have one with you when I think I'm going to possibly do it when I'm 50, like combine it with my 50th, which is next year. But yeah, tell me more about.
I love that idea. I've thought about that a lot, about maybe doing 50th birthday parties and that being the thing. In fact, I'm doing one for my friend, and I think that's maybe part of, I might have to think about that. But going back to what you said about, so the Sally Army, I mean, if anyone's out there that doesn't know what the Sally Army is, look it up, because they are phenomenal people. You've got to think brass bands and uniforms and hats, which is quite an unusual thing these days, isn't it? But what they're really big on is community. So It does not surprise me that it would concern you, with your cultural heritage, that you wouldn't want to be a narcissist. But also, it doesn't surprise me that you understand the value of community and how each thing interplays, because that Salvation Army, they are all about community. That's exactly what they believe in.
Yeah.
So I think, well, to flesh out the idea of it. So what we're not talking about here with a 50th celebration or a menopause celebration, we're not talking about you standing at the front on a stage and everybody giving you a round of applause. You're talking about maybe, just everybody coming with their own a piece of paper with something written on it. I'll give you an example. I may have shared this with you already, but I haven't shared it with all the rest of you, so I will share it with you now. I did a brilliant ceremony for two women who had a daughter very late in life. In fact, one of her mums was 57, and it was all a massive shock. Anyway, they were determined to do it all right, and they wrote all the vows to the baby. They had a naming ceremony, which was all about affirmation. They refused to promise without saying, I will try to do this. And they said, we will try to raise you with a positive sense of self. They did the whole thing from Brené Brown's book of, the thing about positive, all of that. I can't remember the name of it, but we all know Brené Brown, right?
Yeah.
So they did the whole thing about that. But they did it winter solstice, and every winter solstice in their house, they would write a little message of something they wanted to let go. They would wrap it around a twig, and then they would light a fire in the back garden and put it in the fire pit along with all their community to let go of the year and all the things they didn't love. And when we had the ceremony for baby Archer, who's obviously not a baby anymore, who knows how old baby Archer is now, we had the same thing. They couldn't set it alight because it was a community hall, but we made everyone there wrote down something they wanted to let go of and wrapped it around a twig, and then it was taken home and burned in the fire at home. And everybody lit a candle for the future, and everybody thought about what they wanted for the coming year, as well as declaring that this baby belongs. You spoke before about the importance of religion in making you feel like you belong. And that is what naming ceremonies are for. And I feel very much that a menopause is about you belong. You don't become an obsolete thing because you're not a menstruating woman or you're no longer a fertile woman. You don't stop being an individual with a unique sense of self in your communities. And there is something, while I'm on a train of thought, going back to what we were saying about religion and how it intrigues you and how people get into it and that way in which it pulls you into a community and holds you. In the ancient times, think Istanbul, think of that place and all the mosques and all that incredible place. Once upon a time, one of the biggest mosques, Hagia Sophia, was a church, a Christian church, and it was gold mosaic from head to toe, all of it gold and lit with candles. And if you were going to get baptized, and you were asking about baptism earlier, and for those of you who are not familiar with the Christian faith, baptism is a rite of passage into becoming a Christian. So it's sometimes done as babies. With more Protestant traditions, it's done as adults. And it sometimes is where you're plunged into water and out again. But in a Church of England setting, it's just a little dab of water on your head. And then you're welcomed into the church and welcomed into the church family. And in this context, in Istanbul, people would be wrapped in white. So they would go into the dark. Everything was an enclosed underground dark space. So you went into there. I think you were even naked, but don't quote me on it, into the waters. And then that's right, then you go into the waters, you come out of the waters and you're wrapped in white for purity and cleanliness and new beginnings. And then you come out of the cold water, the dark, into this huge vaulted gold space lit with candles. And the transition is from literally darkness to light, from bleak loneliness through the waters of birthing. So it's very visceral, it's all, around womb as well, which gets lost in our current tradition, and then they're born into a new light. So there's something really powerful about birthing in any kind of sense. I also haven't children, but I think birthing can take many forms, and creative fertility can take many forms. And I've always remembered that, the idea of that, the very, very physical nature of ceremonies as they used to be, and how they would rebirth you.
Wow.
So that's something.
I'm really getting a sense of that, actually, of the physicality of being wrapped up quite tightly in white, symbolizing the purity, going into that dark space, being plunged in water, coming out of the water, and then going into that illuminated room. It is very, very indicative of birth and the birthing process. And I wonder if there's people listening to this thinking, yeah, but what does it all mean? It's just stuff that you do. Like, how does it how does that have an impact on your life going forward? You know, when we write down words on a piece of paper and we burn those words, how does that actually change your future? Right. Do you have anything to say about that?
I have loads to say about that. I mean, be careful what you wish for, Sally, because when I get going on this, I'm reading a book called Ritual right now. I wish I had it handy. It's fantastic. And I'm only kind of a couple of chapters in.
What's it called, sorry?
Ritual.
Okay.
And I forget the name of the writer. It's quite big. I think it's been in the charts. So I don't think it would be hard to find it. And his premise from the forward and the beginning of it is to say that, and he has all kinds of evidence, that human beings and animals, including elephants, do the most incredible ritualistic things that make absolutely no sense whatsoever, no rational sense on the face of it. So his question is why? Why is it so fundamental to human beings to do such random, weird shit, basically? Because when you look at symbolism from the background, from the outside in, when you look at ritual from the outside in, and you know yourself from all kinds of movies you've watched, if you hear ritual, you're probably thinking weird, or I don't know, satanic or something like that. But no, we're not talking about weird stuff like that. Not talking about anything particularly that's associated with danger or anything. Ritual might be you having your cup of tea in the morning. It might be like my friend always has a little dash of milk but no more. Some people have to have exactly the right cup. And you can look this up as well with Esther Perel, and many of you will be very familiar with her. She's an incredible psychiatrist, and she will talk about ritual with you as well. Think about your life. Think about the weird stuff you do ritualistically that you don't even know is a ritual. In your family, I would put money on it that in your family you have a thing that you do that no other family does. And you might have come from a religious tradition where you go on a pilgrimage every year. Maybe you go on the Hajj every year because you're from a Muslim family. But among all of that, there are funny little things that we do. When you go and see someone in a coffee shop in Brighton or anywhere in the UK, what's the first thing you say? Isn't the weather dreadful? It's either too hot or it's too cold or it's raining or whatever. That is the opener. That's how it is. And if you're not from the UK, if you come here, that's what you need to know. It makes absolutely no sense. Everybody knows it's raining. No one's interested in the fact that it's raining. But ritually, we have to say it, don't we? If we don't say, ooh, some stupid comment about the weather, we don't feel right about anything. And it's bonding is the thing I'm coming to. So rituals are bonding, aren't they? And they're a physical act, which is why this thing of being plunged into water and coming out the other side, it's ritual, but it physically affects us. And when you are bonding with your community, let's say you went to a funeral and you've come out, you've had a good cry, you've come out and Auntie Mary comes up and gives you a hug and tells you, oh, I miss your dad. It was, I remember how naughty he was as a kid. The hug gives you, it's physical, it's neurological, it's an actual thing, isn't it? I mean, you'll know more about this than I do. It's hormonal, it's endorphins, it's everything, dopamine. So you're being surrounded by, when you do a ritual, you're doing it's called an outward sign of an invisible change. That's what they really mean. That's what symbolic is. A symbol is an outward sign of an internal. So you need to externalize these things in the same way that you might need to talk about some dreadful thing happened. You know yourself, you talk about it, and then you feel better. You don't actually know why you feel better that you talked about it, but you really needed to damn well tell someone how bad that thing was. That's why we have talking therapies. That's why we have mindset coaches, because we need to externalize our experience. And ritual and symbolism externalizes experience in context, in community usually. Sometimes it's private. And it means that you have the physical connection, which literally changes our physical selves and our emotional selves.
Wow, you have said something there so incredibly powerful that all my neurons are firing, going ding, ding, ding. This episode is brought to you by the Menopause Mindset Hypnosis Collection. It's becoming common knowledge among scientific communities that our thinking can radically affect our body chemistry at a molecular level. Our bodies literally respond to expectations, conditions, and beliefs. This is how the placebo effect works. Dawson Church, the author of The Genie in Your Genes, says, each of us holds the key to a pharmacy containing a dazzling array of healing compounds. Our brains are themselves generating the drugs similar to those that a doctor is prescribing for us. That's why I'm so excited for you to experience my newly revamped and highly innovative hypnosis recordings. There's nothing else as unique as this on the market today. So how would you like to cool your hot flush, ignite your libido, clear your brain fog, release your joints, or even sail through menopause? Well, now you can. Just relax and listen to the 25-minute recording of your choice every day for 30 days and watch the changes kick in. Each recording is just $24.99, or you can get the entire collection for $59.99, which is a saving of £65. But it doesn't stop there. Inside this bundle, I also include my popular Mind Over Menopause Masterclass, where you can learn the mindset hacks to help you have a better menopause transition. And all of these are contained neatly inside the Kajabi app for easy access. Just visit sallygarozzo.com/shop to find out more or make a purchase. I look forward to seeing you inside the Menopause Mindset Hypnosis Collection. This episode is brought to you by my mini course, Create Phenomenal Self-Esteem. This course will help you to reclaim your inner confidence and turn your light all the way up so that you can have more success in every way. Did you know that you can have phenomenal high self-esteem and be a nice person? This mini course gives you maximum results and a roadmap to create phenomenal self-esteem with just the right amount of detail, the right amount of journal prompts, neurobiological technology, and one-to-one support to jumpstart your journey, and all for just the price of £47. This mini course is for you if you can be harsh, hurtful, and critical towards yourself. It's for you if you're crippled by a feeling that nothing changes. And it's for you if your relationships, work, health, and happiness are all taking a bit of a hit. Included in the course is my high self-esteem strategy, which is a 2-part, 6-step strategy delivered to you over 2 weeks. This is a conscious pathway that you can follow for the rest of your life to turn low self-esteem around. It's simple, effective, and enjoyable. It also includes a soaring self-esteem hypnosis recording, because without tapping into the power of the subconscious mind, change rarely occurs. And finally, it includes a one-to-one support session with me, because you're not a robot, frankly. You need nuanced support. Not many online courses give you access to one-to-one help, but I do because I understand the power of validation and accountability. So, what are you waiting for? Come and join me. Create phenomenal self-esteem today. Just visit sallygarozzo.com/self-esteem. We're making something that's in our head, we're externalizing it, as you said. It's almost like we're making it real. Because when it's inside of us, maybe there's a bit of self-doubt, maybe there's a bit of devalidation, maybe there's a bit of nobody understands me, or feeling alone, feeling isolated in what we're feeling, because how can anyone feel what we feel? Nobody can. So by creating ceremony and actually externalizing how we feel by doing these weird things that we do, waving flags or, wafting incense, lighting candles, singing songs, holding hands, reading poetry, all this stuff, wearing specific colors, it makes it real. And so you're turning the inside out. It's something that you can see, that then your mind, I guess there's probably certain neurons in the brain that when it looks at all that external stuff, or hears it or smells it or tastes it or touch it through the sensory processes, it's then getting fed back and probably creating like a tick box or something in your brain, like this is real, this happened, tick. And so then it can probably then move down the analytical brain and get stored in the long-term memory, and everything feels a bit more coherent and cohesive in the mind, and then you get that settling downness. But until that's happened, I guess it's like just wafting around in the ether, sort of unrealized, unactualized. And I think for menopause, I can really see the power of that now, actually. Can really see the power of that. Yeah.
I mean, yes, there you have exactly it. You've nailed it. You've said it much better than I could. It turns the inside out. And in so doing, it means that your experience is witnessed, A, and you are made accountable, B, and your community is made accountable to you, so that we are caring for one another. In an individualist society, this is countercultural, but it is as old as, and when you read the ritual book, it will tell you how old it is, this ritual stuff that we do. It's acknowledgement, it's witnessing, it's empowerment, it's affirmation, it's accountability. So let's say you're in a one of the ceremonies I'm doing, I'm excited. I'm going to have people tell their besties, I want you to make me accountable for X and Y. And one of the things I'm hoping will come from it is, I ask you, let's call them Jenny, I ask you, Jenny, to hold me accountable to the following. Every time I tell myself I'm an old hag, or I'm ugly, or I hate my wrinkles, or I don't like my, my belly fat, all the stuff we do to ourselves. Every time I say that, Jenny, I want you to look me in the eye and say, stop it. Or every time I feel sad, I want you, I don't know, let's call him Bob. I want you to remind me that being sad is allowed. That's what I would like to do. I would like to incorporate contemporary psychological understanding around affirmation and accountability, so that we have people around us who are saying, we've got you, and this is important. And I think that's really powerful too.
Yeah, it really is, because that is, in the modern world that we live in the individualistic culture that we live in, that collective community care is really lacking. And I think we are all crying out for it, actually, especially those of us in menopause that do feel alone and isolated, and perhaps haven't had children, or children have flown the nest, parents live away, parents maybe are deceased now, and we are in the midst of change. Maybe we've moved to a different place, like you have, Jess, and you're you don't know anyone yet. There can be a lot of isolation and loneliness with any sort of transitions. Have you? I know you have, but I just want to talk about it with you. The Channel 4 program, The Change. You've seen it, haven't you?
I've seen it. I love it.
Wasn't it amazing? If you haven't seen The Change on Channel 4, and if you're not in the UK, I don't know if you'll be able to get it, but my God, she goes through, wasn't it the eel ceremony, the eel queen? She becomes the eel queen. It's so random.
It's so random. Headdress, feathers. But I guarantee that anyone that watched it would be saying, oh, that was brilliant, that thing. It makes absolutely no sense, as previously discussed, but it is turning the inside out. And as you were talking, I was thinking of all the little ways, the conversations I've had with women and podcasts I listen to. And I'm a massive fan of Glennon Doyle. And she has a podcast called We Can Do Hard Things. And if you haven't heard it, you must. One of the things she discusses is that when she went into recovery she had substance abuse issues, she was dependent on alcohol. And she was talking about going into recovery and realizing that she knew a woman who had body lotion. And at the time, she had neglected her sense of self to such an extent that seeing a woman put body lotion on felt revolutionary, like an act of defiance. And she remembers saying to herself, I mean, it makes me go tingly just thinking about it. She said to herself, this woman takes time to put cream on her body. She thinks it matters. That's amazing. And so let's say we were doing a menopause ceremony for Glennon Doyle, and she now has the cream, and her wife said, that's why you've got body lotion all over the house. I had no idea that that was why you did that. So when you buy a bottle of cream, you could equally say, what's the point in that? What difference does it make that I'm buying cream? But if you're putting cream on every day, you are ritualizing that experience. You are externalizing that need. So we could do a ceremony for Glennon Doyle, and in that we would use lotion, and we would have the people in our lives who are comfortable with massage each other's hands. That is ritual. That is human contact. That is community. Very, very simple things.
Yeah, and I've had that experience as well, actually, with body lotion. Thinking, God, who has time to put body lotion on, you know? And then a friend of mine was like, you don't wear body lotion? God, I put body lotion on every single night after I've come out the shower. I'm like, you have time for that? And she's like, yeah, I wouldn't be without it. So it's just this whole, like, we're so different, aren't we? It's just, and I do now. I don't put it on everywhere. I put it on my arms and legs because I don't actually like the feeling of it everywhere on my body. But yeah, there are certain dry spots, shall we say, that actually really need it as you dry out with age. But I love how unique these ceremonies can be. I really love that you pointed that out, like how what's special to one person might not be significant to another. So when you're designing a ceremony for someone, how does it actually work?
Well, it's really simple. It starts with a coffee and a chat. It's very non-intimidating, whatever the word is for that, accessible, easy. We meet in a fancy coffee shop and we drink coffee together, or whatever your tipple is. And I have one of my fancy notebooks and I ask you about your life. And this is really, really important and really powerful for people, because not every woman gets to tell their story. And I have done way too many funerals for people women in their 50s, and I would say they've died from selflessness, honestly. All you hear is, she was so selfless. But they don't really have anything much more to say about mum, because mum didn't tell her story. I urge you to tell your story. So you would sit with me and you would tell me your story, and I would ask you, and I would ask all of your people, what are 5 words to describe? So I might say, give me 5 words to describe Sally, or tell me a funny story about Sally. So those are the questions I would ask your people. I might give you a questionnaire and you would answer those questions, which would be different for you than they would be for funerals or for weddings. But there would be things like a unique, quirky thing that you do, some weird thing that no one else does. And everybody has something. I have a groom coming up who has to put a sheet of white paper on the front of his car on the dashboard. What is he has to do something every time he sees a white van. He has to tap. No, every time he sees something, I can't remember what it is. He has to tap white. So he has to have a piece of white in his. I mean, I have no idea, but these things are really funny and they're really interesting, and they tell your story in so many subtle ways. So I'd be asking you, and a lot of you out there will really struggle to answer these questions, because it might be, what is your favorite thing? What do you want from your life? Who are the people in your life who give to you the most? What makes you feel happiest? You might think, nothing makes me happy. I don't have those people in my life. I don't know the answer to these questions. And we would tease out from that what you want from that, what is missing, what you might want from your future, but also then a little bit about your story, how you ended up being Sally, where you've come from. And from there, you design, is a bit like a vision board, I guess, or a mood board. You design something that is entirely Sally. So the whole essence of Sally is coming out of those coffees and those chats. And then over time, we back and forth over emails and maybe meet up again until we have a structure and a story and we have what we want to do. If you're a big party girl, you might want to have a big party. And if you're not, then you might want to have an afternoon tea. But it might be anything. But it all depends upon you.
I really love this idea because I'm not a big party goer. I don't drink alcohol, but I do want to do something really, really special. And when I had my hen do, my friend actually organised the most wonderful, wholesome hen for me. And it was an afternoon tea and there was champagne, and I did have a glass of champagne. but she got everybody to write down their favorite memory, their best memory, popped it in a card, and she gave me all the cards, and I stood up and I read them out, and it was so lovely because everyone was there. And there were other things as well. There were, I think, some photographs that my mum had sent in, and I had to talk about what these photographs were all about, and it felt so special. I think I was a little bit embarrassed, actually. I don't think I was quite ready to have that level of that level of eyes, that level of attention on me, and I didn't feel at the time, didn't really feel like I deserved it. So it's so weird. I think going into it now, knowing what I know now, know all the work that I've done on myself, and I think perhaps collaborating with you on this ceremony, I think I will set the intention of really being able to receive that, like being able to really let that in. Because I would imagine that if you're not used to having a lot of attention or a lot of love or a lot of respect or a lot of appreciation, how do you hold that in your energy field? You automatically reject it, don't you? I don't know if you've seen that. Have you seen that in some ceremonies?
Well, it's a big thing. I have a lot of anxious brides, for example, who don't want to be in the limelight. You hear all the time, oh, it's all about the bride. Most brides do not want it to be all about the bride, in my experience. And so I do a lot of work. I used to be very involved with the neurodiverse theatre company. I did a lot of work with neurodiversity. So I'm very used to finding ways of making things safe. And I've brought a lot of that work and knowledge to working in ceremony. So I would say that those people I work with don't want that. And so I devise ceremonies where that's not happening. So you're not feeling at the front, having people say nice things to you, not least because it's not very English. It's not certainly, it isn't for any culture in Britain, I don't think. I'd want to think about the communities in Britain. There may be some communities that feel comfortable with that, but in general, I think Britishness precludes being applauded for being amazing. So I just tend to make ceremonies where people are sitting in a circle. Maybe, let's imagine, I'm doing an event on the 31st of July at Beach Box Sauna in Kemp Town. And it will be all over my social media, and I'll tell you about it later. But we have the saunas. People can use the saunas. There'll probably be 25 people there. We're having Greek food. There's going to be a fire pit. We are going to paint some pebbles in memory of people that we love. And I'm going to share this stuff I've shared today, my passion for what I do, and how it might work. Now, your ceremony, if you're out there thinking, oh, I'd love to do it, but I really don't have the courage to be, and I can't, and it's cringe, and I can't bear the thought of a big party, and you don't let that go. You don't have to do that in order. And I think sometimes in answer to your question, how do you let it in? One of the ways in which you let it in is to think this is for everybody.
Yeah.
We all need this feeling. We all need this experience. And so if you're sat in a group and you're part of that group and you're all saying this is important stuff, it's less about you, and then your defenses are down and you're not dealing with the shame of making yourself feel important. It's about you, but it's not. It's about you and you're within this group. And then we're all talking about something that's important for women. You're doing this on behalf of other women too, and people who identify as women. You're having a thing where you're saying, right, this is important. We don't need to feel shit about ourselves anymore, and we're not going to. We're going to find ways, and we're going to find ways of healing, and so it's about empowerment. And I think that's the way in. That's what I think.
Yeah, maybe I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. So as we wrap things up, this is quite a big topic to wrap things up with, but I do want to touch on it. I want to talk about death a little bit anyway, and I want to talk about living wakes, but I want to talk about why we don't talk about death enough in our society, and how and what living wakes actually are, like what they would be used for, really. So yeah, can we riff around those subjects?
Yes. First off, living wake. A living wake is, remember in Ireland, there's a tradition in the pub, basically dead body in coffin in the pub. everybody's having a whiskey. Your man's in the coffin, but you're telling the stories of Terry. I actually knew someone called Terry from Kerry and Derry, which I love. Let's say he's Terry. You're telling Terry stories. That's what you're doing. You're having a drink and you're consoling one another and you're celebrating Terry's life, but Terry's dead. And a living wake is the same, but Terry's alive. So increasingly people don't want funerals, and they will tell you, and you will hear this all the time. And now that you're thinking about it, I guarantee you'll be thinking, yeah, there was that actually. Mum did say that, I don't want to fuss. And Dad did say, put me out with the bins, I'm not bothered. And I did watch that thing where I thought, what's the point? And it's a waste of time. I don't think any of those things, but that is how the culture is right now. And that is because of COVID. When we had COVID, everyone thought after COVID we'll all have these ceremonies because we couldn't have them. And isn't it dreadful that we couldn't have them? What actually happened was that people realized that they didn't have to have them. And that felt great because that's like a get out of jail card. We don't have to do that hard work anymore. We don't have to have the curtains or the burial or the lowering or any of the EastEnders style visions of rain and black umbrellas. It's not like that. We don't have to do it, which leaves you with a gap. What do we do now? And there's a huge shift because of what we were saying about religion, actually. It's not so common for people to think that there is an afterlife in quite the same way, although many of you will be spiritual people and many of you will have your own ideas about what that looks like. People are not as non-religious as we think. They just call it spirituality and they believe in angels, for example. So that's a very complex area. So a living wake is celebrating your life before you die. And it's usually for someone who knows that they're dying, but I guess it doesn't need to be. If you're very old, you might be nearer to death than the next person, and you might just want to have a big old bash or a quiet little afternoon tea. For me, my living wakes are particular. They're different because I focus on the storytelling, which is where we came in with it. So I would sit you around your kitchen table, which is what I do with your family when you're dying. If you've had a death in the family and you book me for your funeral, I come to your kitchen and I have the dog on my lap. Usually in Brighton, it's a dachshund. I went to one family, they had 9. It's crazy.
Wow.
And we sit and we talk and we reminisce about the person who's died. That's what I do. And with this, I do that, but you're alive. And you've got snacks. You've got all your favourite drinks, your favourite snacks. For me, it will be hot chocolate because I also don't drink. And you've got your pets there and you've got all the favourite people that you love and none of the people you don't want there. So there's none of the social awkwardness if I don't want them there because they're just not there because they're not damn well coming because you didn't invite them. So you're there and you're having strawberries and cream. I don't know. You pick. Samosas, whatever your thing is. I did just slightly off topic, at an amazing festival funeral for someone who was big on music. And the whole thing was wall-to-wall David Bowie and a huge bus covered in faux fur, which was yellow and black zebra. And all we did was listen to that music. So he owned a music shop. And then they had a huge curry buffet after. So you can have a curry buffet if you like. I feel like that's a good one. But really, I'm thinking 6 to 12 people because, as we said, I don't really work that much with big divas or limelight people. So we're thinking calm home setting or maybe on the beach or in a favourite location. And you sit about doing all of this and I'm a fly on the wall writing notes and asking people who are there to tell me the stories. We're watching a video of your life. We're looking at the photo albums of the 80s and the awful puff sleeves and those dreadful bridesmaids dresses we were forced to wear. And we're talking about Duran Duran and ABBA and all the songs we loved. And maybe we're playing them. And in the meanwhile, I'm going around and I'm just taking notes about you and your life and who you were. And then I go away and I create a keepsake book, which is about 10 pages of writing and 10 pages of images. And it's the essence of you, which would have been a eulogy, but much, much shorter. It would have been a 3-minute eulogy in a creme. And this is an extended life story for you, beautiful, illustrated for your family. And when you die, they all have your story told your way. And they can use it for a funeral if they want to. They can use it with another celebrant to create a eulogy or a ceremony, or they can just, everyone in the family can have a copy as an heirloom. So that's the living wakes. So there's a common conception, and death educators will say, and you will hear a lot, that we don't talk about death anymore. We don't talk about it, it's taboo. And I'm not sure I believe in that. So I met you, and I'd never met you before, didn't know you from Eve, and you started talking with me about death. We didn't even use the word death. What I think is, this is my research, this is what I'm learning and seeing. I think we use a different language to communicate about death. I don't think we're not talking about death. We're talking about when somebody passed. We're sitting on benches with the names of people who used to sit on these benches. We're talking about mum's favourite food and who they used to be. We're not saying death or dying or opening in like big conversations about my dad died or death is a terrible thing. We're not talking about death in the same way, but we are still having those conversations. What I think you'll find if you think about your own lives, if you think about when am I talking about death and are we and is it taboo, it may be for you that it is taboo and you don't talk about it in your family for whatever reason. But I bet you've had pets who have died. I bet you've had people use the word remembrance, ceremonies, or celebrating life or legacy. I bet you've had conversations about, oh, it's a real shame he passed last year. It was very difficult at the end. But you probably won't use the word funeral or death. But you will, because death is everywhere in your life. But it's that we don't talk about death in such a monumental Victorian way. But if you think about the films you're watching, are you watching Afterlife on TV? With Richard, I'm not either, but Ricky Gervais has got this thing called
that
Afterlife.
one, yeah.
I've never
I have
watched
heard of it.
Evidently, it's very, very interesting. That's all about death and processing. We talk about trauma all the time. We talk about grief all the time. But we seem to have this narrative that we don't talk about death in our culture. Maybe what is meant by that is that we don't talk about the reality of it being imminent for us all, that we could all die at any minute, that we all need to write a will because we could all die at any minute. And we don't want that to be true. So I suppose what is being said by that is that we're a bit avoidant about harsh realities. We don't want them to be true. But if any of you had people die during COVID, sure, you've talked about death. I'm sure you have. It's just that it's not happening. I think it's just not happening necessarily in a public realm, or it's being done through entertainment or doing films. Lots of films that you watch now, if you go to the cinemas or Netflix, whatever you stream, there's a lot of stuff about death, loads of stuff about death. And a lot of that is post-COVID, people trying to understand what they believe now. And but caveat, I talk about death all the time, so I'm very desensitized.
Yeah.
And I can open conversations around death all of the time, and people are usually quite relieved when they speak to me about it because I'm a safe pair of hands. It might well be, if you're not in the death educating or the death arena, that you're not talking about death at all. And it's just that I happen to open those conversations a lot and have them a lot because of my research. But I think even then, if you take me out of the equation, if you look more broadly at the culture, which is where we learn about how we are in our society, there is quite a lot out there if you think about it.
We'll start probably seeing it everywhere now because of that reticular activating system. Now, those people that are listening to this right now will be like, oh my God, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. It is everywhere. And I think menopause is a time where we do start thinking about death a bit more. Like, I know for me, I never really thought about death. And then it wasn't really suddenly, but it started creeping up on me where I would think about it in the middle of the night. I would think about what it would be like to die. Would I die alone because I don't have children? What's my death going to be? What am I going to die from? I think possibly because my nan died when I met my husband all those years ago. And so there was like a weird time of elation, but also sadness. And I think I was quite protected around death. We didn't really talk about it. It was quite a taboo subject. And then when my nan was kind of losing her grip on life and there was a huge amount of sadness, it was very difficult to know how to deal with those feelings, actually, if I'm honest. And thankfully, I was at BIM doing songwriting. And so I wrote her a song I wrote her a song called Nana. And, I'm getting all teary-eyed now. And it was just a lovely way of processing the end of her life. It was actually quite a graphic song. It was a beautiful ballad, but it was quite graphic. And I think I just needed to process it in that way, really. Yeah, it's a subject that makes me feel very vulnerable. But having said that, I want to go there. Like, I want to feel that vulnerability, because I think I feel more vulnerable bottling it up and not talking about it. So I think when I met you, I felt almost like, oh, thank God, there's someone I can talk to about. It was like an instant feeling in my body of release and relief when you said that you did living wakes. And I was like, what's that? And you said, have a funeral before you die. I was like, thank God.
So maybe you're right then. Maybe people aren't talking about it, or maybe people aren't talking about the dying process.
Right.
That's squeamish and medical and detached from our everyday. That is not in the public space. And I think that might be what is meant by we don't talk about death, or we don't talk about it within our family systems. It's a bit like, a bit awkward.
It's too close to home. It's too real. It just feels too visceral. You know, the thought that your loved one went through that pain, and what's my death going to be like? You know, all of that kind of very intense stuff.
It's interesting. So this implies that there's a willingness to talk about it, but no context in which to do it. I meet a lot of, what are they called, the generation now in their 20s? Gen Z, are they?
I don't know.
Gen Z?
Yeah.
I don't know, we're the young ones in their 20s. They're brilliant. They're really good at talking about stuff. They think Gen X, like you and I, are really kind of bottled up and hopeless. So I think there's a movement towards that emotional maturity and openness, because they're really cool, aren't they? They're really cool about therapy and talking stuff.
Yeah. Mental health.
Health. So I think that there'll be a bit of a tide turning with the next generation, telling us that we're all a bit uptight. I heard someone say it. Mum, she's Gen X, you know what they're like, they don't talk. Well, that's hilarious, because I talk a lot more than my family did, but I can see that we're maybe a bit more conservative about how we share in England, not so much in the States. So maybe in answer to your question then, that people don't talk about dying, and they don't talk about their own dying or their own process, and they don't talk about it to their intimate people because there's no context in which to do that. But people talk to me about it because I'm a safe context in which to do it, which is why people burst into tears on me all the time. If any of you are listening and you've burst into tears, that is standard. That is my life. People burst into tears on me all the time.
Well, you definitely are a safe space. You really, really are. You're very considered in the way that you speak. The language that you use is really considered, and your energy is very safe and welcoming, and you're interested in people's stories, you know, interested in how people have lived their lives and who they are, which is clearly why you are excellent at doing the job that you do. So, Jess, thank you so much for this brilliant conversation. It's so unusual, but I think it's so relevant. And I just wonder what people's expectations were at the start of this conversation. Like, why is there a conversation around ceremony on a podcast about menopause? But I think we've done a really good job at making that really clear, actually. And I think hopefully now people will see the relevance of it, and death as well, like this whole narrative around it. So thank you for making it easy for me.
No, I loved it. You're so welcome. I think the heart of it is rehumanizing us. So we're not medical. Like, we're not just our hormones. We are full human holistic beings, and that's what ceremony is for. It's about humanizing us and our societies. That's why I love it, and that's why I care about it, and why I don't work in a shop.
I loved that.
Loved it. Thanks for having me.
So, Jess, where are you most active on social media?
I've got a YouTube channel, which is Jess May. I've got a podcast, which is Opening Ceremony. But I think if you go on Instagram, if you're an Instagram person, go for Crazy Diamonds Funeral Queen. So that's me, at Crazy Diamonds Funeral Queen. I'm Brilliant. Also all over the place on the internet, Jess May or Jess May Special Days. Jess May Living Wakes will bring up find me immediately, because there's 2 sites in the UK and then there's me. I'm the only person doing it. So you will find me if you put Jess May Living Wakes in. I'm there.
Yeah,
You'll find me
awesome. Go and make contact with Jess. As we've been speaking, I've been really thinking about how I can utilize your services within my own life, for my mum and dad, obviously for myself. But hopefully this conversation will have planted some seeds in your mind about how you can encourage other people, how you can share Jess with other people, and invite the idea of living wakes and all the other ceremonies that you do into your loved one's life. So yeah, go and follow her, go and make contact with her.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, my love. So I'd love to know what your biggest takeaways were. Be sure to leave a comment below and subscribe, like and share. Just so you know, not all podcasts are uploaded here. So if you want the full array of episodes, head on over to Spotify or Apple and search The Menopause Mindset. You also might like to come and find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn or TikTok. Just search at Sally Garozzo Mind Mentor. All right, folks, thank you so much for your support and attention. It means the world. Have a great week and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.